welcome to Futureproof, Rahul.
Thank you, Penny. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Now, you're a bit of an interesting character, not just for your hat. So you are the founder of the Disruptive Business Network. Yes. So if you ever want to create disruption, you go and create a network around disruption.
Yeah, that's one way to do it.
And you're also the co-founder of Balancing Act 3, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So perhaps talk to us a little bit around what it is that you do in both of these spaces.
Sure. So the Disruptive Business Network is an event series primarily that looks at how new ideas and technology are changing business and changing the world. And another big focus is on meaningful work. How can people find meaningful work? And it started off as a side project that I was working for a startup. That startup didn't eventuate, but we were just sitting around thinking, we'd all come from corporate backgrounds, and we thought that's not the future of business or work. So what is the future? And so we started looking at our networks and seeing who's doing cool stuff and just going up to them and saying, hey, we've got a platform, come tell your story.
Interesting.
So it just started from that, and it started with small events at the basement of Shabin, which no longer exists, unfortunately, which was a bar in the Melbourne CBD.
Yep.
And yes, from there, that was about 4 years ago. From there, it's slowly grown to bigger and better events. And from that, I also do lots of consulting work with various people and companies. Yeah.
And talk to us about your other business, because I think the stuff that you're doing in the disability space is really interesting.
So Balancing Act 3 came about after a kind of one of those serendipitous, lucky interactions. It was a Friday night. We were having drinks at Inspire 9, which is a co-working space. And I got talking to my now business partner, Anna McCracken, who was working for the NDIA. She was going to various trial sites of the NDIS.
What is the NDIA and what is India?
Question.
Yeah, and NDIS.
So the NDIS is the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Yeah.
And just in a nutshell, what it is so traditionally there were people with disabilities, there are disability service providers, and there's the government. So the government would fund disability service providers and tell them, you create the services that you think people with disabilities would need. So with the NDIS, it's a flip model where the government is taking that funding and giving it directly to people with disabilities and telling them, you're in charge now. You pick and choose the services that you think you need. So what's happening is, from a human rights perspective, it's an amazing initiative. But what's happening is this middle band of disability service providers have now got to think entrepreneurially and think about creating services that people would actually need. And so that's created a need for kind of entrepreneurial thinking. And so we were talking about this over many glasses of red wine. And at the time I was consulting for tech startups, and we thought, hey, there's a real confluence here. And so that's the birth of Balancing Act 3, which is a line from a Dr. Seuss poem, Over the Places You'll Go.
Oh, I love that poem. I talk about Dr. Seuss all the time.
Yeah, there you go.
There's a man that was ahead of his time. Yeah, those books were written 45 years ago.
I know. It's incredible.
And it's like, how did he see stuff that a lot of people back then?
I know. Like all those guys, like you read George Orwell now, and he's like,
yeah,
that's happening today.
But the Lorax, I love the Lorax. So, let's talk macro to start off, yeah? So one of the things that we talk a lot about when we kickstart these conversations is trends, and I'd be really interested because you and I tend to pop up at the same spaces, funnily enough, and that's where we run into each other. What sort of macro trends are you observing that I suppose excite you and disturb you in the context of the work that you're doing?
I think what excites me is that, and this is kind of my view of the world, is that businesses are realizing that short-termism is not working. By short-termism, I mean proving to shareholders that we're making a profit every 3 months.
Yeah.
And I think businesses are realizing that to succeed now, they really need a long view of things. And also, and just from the younger generation and from, I think especially millennials, the currency is shifting from currency as in pay to purpose. Like there's more shift of how do I find meaning and how to find purpose in the work that I do, rather than am I earning 100 grand a year.
Yeah.
I think what's disturbing is I think the rampant exponential rate that technology is advancing without, I think, I don't see any real policy or safeguards to deal with that advance.
It's almost like there's no conscious collective thought
Yes.
around what the impacts will be on our society with all of this change coming on stream at once. Like no one's looking at it from an integrated perspective.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I think that's one of the things about technology is that it advances exponentially, whereas policy and all of that advances linearly, if at all.
Or we wait until it happens and then we work it
And then we
out.
go, oh, what now?
Whereas it's very hard to correct, isn't it? Often when you get to a point where something's already occurred.
So I think sitting here now, I think especially there's a lot of talk on AI, how that's going to change a lot of things. I don't see any real responses from companies or big policy makers on that.
So what one change would you make that you think would make the world a better place if it was simple to do?
I think in the realms of work, and I think this is one of the things I really struggle with, and it's a constant battle for me, is developing a deep focus. Because I think what's going to be important now is we touched on this a little bit earlier, in that we are just so distracted right now. There's pings from Slack, from Twitter, from Facebook, whatever. There's emails that need to be answered right away. We have lost that need or that ability to do deep work. And there's a great book called Deep Work, which I think everyone should read. And I think those of us who have that ability are going to stand out, because the way the world of work is changing, it's not so much you do your bachelor's or you do your master's and then that's it for learning, and then you just coast along for the rest of your career. The way the world of work is changing, what that implies is that we have to be lifelong learners. And what that means is that you're going to have to be able to, your job could disappear tomorrow, so you're going to have to be able to go deep on a separate subject, get really good at it in a matter of months, and then come out and then readapt. And I think to do that, you can't do that if you're answering emails for 6 hours a day.
No. So talk to us a little bit about the work that you're doing in the disability space. I mean, one of the most topical things at the moment is equality. And often when people think equality, because it's what gets the most attention, they think gender equality. But there's a huge opportunity around equality for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And recently I was on a panel with an amazing woman called Hyam, I think that's pronounced correctly, but if it's not, I apologise, who has got a company called Think, Grow, Change. And she basically said that we should design everything for people with disabilities, and that way then we could have equality in the concept of products and services that are developed could be used by everybody and make people's lives easier. So talk to us a little bit around what equality means to you and how you're trying to move us closer to that.
Well, I think a couple of things. Firstly, there was a report written around 2009 that really spearheaded the whole NDIS initiative. It's called the Shutout Report. And that report in a nutshell just says that it's not so much that people are disabled, is that the way the society has been constructed, especially the post-industrial society that's constructed, that's what's disabling to people.
Yeah.
And for example, for me to go from here to Village Cinemas would take about 20 minutes. If I was in a wheelchair, it'll take at least 5 times as long as that. And I think what I'm excited about right now is that City of Melbourne especially they're thinking about this, and they've got an open innovation challenge that's open to everyone. So they really want to get kind of the startup sector involved in various sectors, and it's really about how to make the city of Melbourne more accessible.
And you're working with virtual reality teams to play this game.
Yes, so we are working with a startup called Foria who do a lot of work in virtual reality. And what we're trying to do is create a virtual reality empathy tool just to demonstrate to people that let's demonstrate to able-bodied neurotypical people what it would be like to live the life of someone in a wheelchair and and have a simple journey from, say, Flinders Street to point B.
Something that they wouldn't even think about in their day-to-day.
Exactly, yeah.
And what does success look like? Like, what outcome are you hoping for as a result of this work?
So with that project specifically, we hope to first maybe create a tool that maybe can be used by City of Melbourne for their council or their wayfinding experts to show them what it'd be like. And then maybe from there, take it to designers in general, architects, builders, if they're building a project, have a look and see, are you really encompassing everyone?
But its application could be so much broader than that, couldn't it? I mean, there's so many corporations now looking at how they bring greater equality into the workplace.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, and that's another thing, is that the diversity conversation is really about gender or what you look like, but that the diversity conversation, I think, really there's a spectrum that really needs to include people of all abilities as well. Yeah.
So the context of this series is about helping the everyday person future-proof themselves in the context of what we're talking about, of this exponential growth in technology and how different our lives are going to look just in the next 5 years alone. So talk to us a little bit about how you're future-proofing yourself.
Yeah, great question. I think, firstly, got to admit, it's a struggle. I am completely addicted to my phone. And I think what's really pernicious about that is that I believe the founders of the tech companies had that in mind when they created these technologies like Facebook, and just like economies of the old were built on, companies digging stuff out of the ground and then like oil or gas and then selling that to create value for their shareholders. What tech companies are doing is digging into your attention, and the more attention they can grab, the more value they're creating for their shareholders. So
that's disturbing. It's probably the best analogy I've heard.
Yeah,
but so disturbing.
And you worked in oil before?
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
And I think it's really the same dynamic. And they have the smartest people in the world constantly trying to figure out how they can best grab your attention for a second longer. And I think the way I'm trying to fight that is, firstly, I think everyone should check out the Center for Humane Technology. They're doing a lot of work on this topic. And one of the things they recommended is to go grayscale on your phone, which I have done. And that is because, say, colors, for example, they know what colors attract your attention.
And then it triggers a response in your brain to tap the phone more.
Yep. And it triggers dopamine, not oxycontin. What's the other?
Oxytocin. Yeah.
And yeah, so I think going grayscale on my phone has helped.
Can I just interrupt you? We were talking about this before we started this conversation live. And one of the things that you said, I said, how do I do that? Is it just something in the settings?
Yeah.
And you said to me, no, it's not that straightforward. I'll have to send you the instructions.
Yes.
Isn't it interesting that it's not easy to change? Like, what does that tell you?
It's very interesting that it's not easy to change, because it's not a couple of taps. I had to Google how to do it, and luckily Lifehacker had a post on this is what you do. And yeah, I would never be able to figure it out. Because another thing is, you can't just go grayscale, because say my family sends me a photo, I want to see that in color.
Yeah.
So I need to switch quickly between grayscale and color. And to do that is another complicated step.
But as I say, isn't it interesting that someone's made this hard?
Yeah.
And I'll bet you they know.
They absolutely know.
Yeah. So you just popped into my head. Like, so I love the idea of going grayscale, and I'm definitely going to do it when you send me the instructions. But the other thing, it's almost like, based on, like you say, that they're no different from the oil companies. I am surprised, and maybe this is my next foray, that we haven't created a mobile phone anonymous group. So you've got Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Yeah. How is it that this technology, and I mean, there's so many videos, it's no different in terms of the response that it activates in your brain from drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, right? And look at the reputation of those companies.
Or pokies.
It's the same thing. And like you just said openly, I say the same. I am fully addicted to my mobile phone. I know it, and it drives me insane. But it's almost like, I almost feel like things are going to come full circle, where it will almost become a thing where people start sitting around like Alcoholics Anonymous and start talking about how they overcome this addiction. Because it really is, it is an addiction, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's one thing. And also it goes back to these tech founders. This might be a little extreme, but there's a famous trial in the 1990s called the 7 Dwarfs trial, where the 7 heads of the big tobacco companies were brought before the US Senate and about cigarettes causing cancer.
Yeah.
And all of them stood up and swore under oath
they didn't know
that nicotine is not addictive.
Yeah.
And that the data is ambiguous of whether smoking causes cancer. But what they didn't know was that the FBI had already conducted an investigation proving that they knew that nicotine was addictive, and that they purposely added nicotine to cigarettes to make it addictive. And I think we're going to have another 7 Dwarfs trial with tech companies, knowing that...
Well, we already know it.
Yeah.
Like that video we just watched before with Sean Parker, saying that they absolutely knew what it did in terms of the response of your brain. But we're all loving it, aren't we? Like we're all... and I say to people all the time, I think mobile phones, it's like they've gone out and handed everyone ecstasy. Seriously, it's no different. Or whatever the drug is. The level of control that those phones now wield is unbelievable.
And I think also there is, like, YouTube, you can, like, I'm trying to learn the guitar, so I'm getting onto YouTube videos. You can use it for positive, but YouTube also has 3 billion cat videos. So it's really finding that inner discipline. And I think that's another hack, is to develop that self-discipline muscle, or the willpower muscle. And I think, the way I'm doing it is, before I go to bed, I put my phone on airplane mode.
Yeah.
And I don't turn it back on till I spend an hour in the morning reading. So till after that hour, I don't turn it on. And trust me, like, when I wake up in the morning, I really want to see who's messaged me and it's a real hard thing not to immediately turn it on.
I've done the same thing. I've actually started, because we've got the 2-story house, leaving the phone downstairs from 8:30 at night. So I put it on airplane mode, but I have to physically leave it down here because I don't trust myself in the room with the phone.
Yeah.
But even in terms of when you wake up in the morning, it's not there. Like you say, you're itching.
Yeah.
It's like your body's itching to just see what's there. It's like that Christmas tree, isn't it? That feeling of there might be something in my inbox. So you've talked about the grey screen.
Grayscale.
Grayscale. And you've also talked about just putting the phone on airplane mode. Any advice you would have for someone who is looking to future-proof themselves in the context of their career, given your journey in that space?
Yeah, I think also develop the muscle of being a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
And I think just look at Coursera, look at Udemy, just see what interests you, and then get in there and try and learn about something.
And they're learning platforms for those people who are not familiar with them. Yeah.
So Coursera is a learning platform and they have some incredible courses there from the best unis in the world. And so it's there.
That's what's so interesting, isn't it? And I think that's why the education system is, on this, I think, this tipping point of massive disruption. The next generation teaching us that you can pretty much learn anything off YouTube. I mean, I'm generalizing, but the majority of what you can learn now can be self-taught.
Exactly, yeah. And another thing, yeah, and just I think Edie, one of the speakers at Singularity Conference, she gave this example of it, the next phase of education, say using virtual reality. Why would you need textbooks in terms of if you want to learn about a white blood corpuscle? Why would you read about it when you can use virtual reality and be a white blood corpuscle and travel through the body and see what happens?
What better way to?
Yeah. Just to end on an optimistic note.
Yeah.
Just on the future work and this worry about AI is going to steal our jobs or robots are going to steal our jobs. Mark Andreessen, who is like a big tech investor, he was the founder of Netscape, and he calls out something called the lump of labor fallacy. The lump of labor fallacy, and what that is that we just project to the future what we know from the past. In that, whatever jobs we had in the past, we assume that they're going to magically transcribe into the future, but we have no idea what's coming. Space tourism could be a massive industry that employs everyone, and also, there's so much happening, so we don't really know what's coming next. So, for example, one of the most popular jobs out there now is a UX UI designer.
Oh, I always talk about this. Yeah. And 5 years ago, it was like
5 years ago, it didn't exist.
No.
Yeah. So what's up to us is also, I think, focusing on the macro trends, and I think being educated about what's happening out there, and then noticing a trend and then going deep and trying to figure out as much as you can, and then being someone who is able to do that job.
Joining dots is going to be more important than it ever was.
Absolutely. Curation and joining dots. Because another thing is there's so much information. How do you make sense of it? If you have the ability to, funnel that information and provide value from it, that's hugely
advantageous.
Important skill. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rahul.
Thank you, Penny. This was so much fun.
Always a pleasure.